Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we are doing show number 3 on our running back expectations series. And the first couple guys, it was like, okay, we have a baseline for what this guy looks like. This is a little bit more challenging because we haven't seen him do anything in person in a real game, and he missed a bunch of time last year. So we got to figure out what the heck we're expecting out of Jacoby Jackson this year.
Yeah, and trying to figure that out is extremely difficult because, one, as you said, he played in 4 games last year and was hurt, but he carried the ball 6 or 7 times in each of those 4 games, none of which were really memorable. In 2024, he rushed for over 500 yards, he rushed for 509 yards on 95 carries, including rushing for 116 yards at Texas on 19 carries, rushed for 74 yards the game before that against Georgia, and averaged over 6 yards a carry in both of those games. So do you judge him based on those performances, or do you judge him based on his 3.4 yards per carry against Long Island U last year? Or, Tom, in terms of expectations, do you look at somebody from Ohio State last year, like the CJ Donaldson thing? And so there's a lot of different ways to view this, and anybody who tries to project this and they get it right, and for them to be like, I told you so, you're crazy. You just got lucky. So trying to project here what happens with Jacoby Jackson, I wouldn't say it's a fool's errand because we're doing it. Is it a hero's errand? Yes, it is a hero's errand. It's a hero's journey. It's the stuff that one of these days Christopher Nolan's going to make a movie about this very show. So, Tom, I'll let you go first. Do you have any kind of how would you go forth and build these expectations for Jacoby Jackson?
Yeah, this is definitely the trickiest of the 3 that we've done, just because you mentioned the ceiling here, I think, is the numbers from a couple of years ago where he had that 3-game stretch where it's Georgia, Texas, LSU. Those are 3 good defenses, and he's 6.2 yards a carry, 6.1 yards per carry, 6.2 yards per carry, had a touchdown in all 3 of those games, and 12 for 74, 19, 116, 637, and a touchdown in all 3 of those games. But that's really been the high watermark for him against good competition. He had better yards per carry against Samford and UCF. I don't really count those. And then last year really didn't do a whole heck of a lot before that injury. So I think between that uncertainty and the fact that if you go back, we're projecting Bo Jackson to have about 1,200 yards, give or take, Isaiah West to have about 800 yards, give or take. That doesn't leave that many more carries. I think this is probably a guy who's in that RB3 kind of role and maybe a little bit of a situational player. Before the spring, I would have thought about him as maybe like the CJ Donaldson guy, but I don't know that they're going to have a dedicated CJ Donaldson this year. So I would look at this as probably somewhere in the neighborhood of where maybe James Peoples ended up last year, a little north of there, probably. James Peoples had 61 carries, 344 yards, 5.6 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. That was kind of your RB3 last year for most of the season. I think he's probably going to end up with a few more carries than that, probably not getting to 100. I said in one of the shows earlier in the week, they could get 3 guys to 100, and they certainly could. If Jacoby Jackson's healthy, maybe he gets to 100. I think he's probably more in that 75 to 80 carries, give or take, and maybe 5 yards per carry, because I think you're going to have him in some short yardage situations, which is going to push those numbers down a little bit. So rough numbers like 80 carries, 5 yards a carry, 400 yards, something like that, a few touchdowns, a handful of touchdowns, 3-ish touchdowns. I don't know. I feel like this is like an opening bid. I don't know. Would you like to counter my opening offer?
No, I think those are valid numbers. And when you look at because I'm looking at last year's Ohio State numbers as well in terms of like who does this fit? And I don't know maybe it fits more James Peoples in terms of somebody who will get more carries at the outset, and then there's this valley where they have no carries, and then maybe some more carries at the end. I don't necessarily see this as an Isaiah West where there's no carries at the start and then you get more carries, but and then for some reason there's no more carries. Maybe it's more of a CJ Donaldson where there's carries throughout, but the effectiveness of them is not great. I think I have no reason to expect or no reason to think that Jacoby Jackson would be more effective than CJ Donaldson with his carries, other than the fact that CJ Donaldson was not very effective with his carries. So that's why I think just about anybody you bring in would be more effective. And I'm saying just about anybody, like just within reason, somebody who is talented and somebody who has rushed for 100 yards at Texas and Austin, you'd think. And I bet if we go back, I know CJ Donaldson had some big games at West Virginia, but I'm kind of wondering if he starts out as the number three, 2.5 even, and is getting 6 to 7 carries a game like he did last year. But as the season goes on, maybe he's out there more for pass protection, or he's out there on third downs as a receiver type. And so he doesn't while he plays, the number of the percentage of plays where he's in there and he gets the ball is going to be lower than the percentage of plays where they get the ball for everybody else in the running back room. So he may play the third most snaps, but he may end up with the fourth most carries. I think that's a very real possibility, or the fourth most touches. So 375, 400 yards. That's kind of in between the James Peoples, Isaiah West, where they both rushed for they James Peoples rushed for 344 yards, Isaiah West rushed for 310 yards. But if they had both played consistently, they would have rushed for more. So if Jacoby Jackson plays consistently, he will rush for more. But also, does he get the 6 carries a game that Isaiah West averaged in his games? And I say average because it was like this. If Jacoby Jackson averages 6 carries a game, then that's what 35 yards rushing a game over the course of 12 to 15 games. You're four or 500 yards. That seems fitting. So I'm okay with 400 yards rushing on the season, and I don't think that's. I don't know. Is that low? I mean, maybe, but he rushed for 500 yards in 2024 as a real part of the Florida offense. So if he's a real part, like you can be a real part of an offense and only rush for 400 yards.
Well, and I think his role with the offense could be, yeah, he's rushing for 400 yards, but also he's a relatively dynamic part of that passing attack.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we both came into the spring thinking, okay, this is just 2026 CJ Donaldson. And then you watched him during practice and it was like, okay, there's more here. He's a little bit more dynamic with the ball in his hands. He looked really impressive at times in that passing game where he could really be a weapon for them where yeah, you put him in these pass pro situations, but also he can leak out of that backfield and then not just catch the ball, but maybe do something with the ball, make a guy miss in the passing game. So I think his role could sort of expand. It's a little outside the scope of this conversation because we're really just talking about rushing totals, but I think his role could be bigger than just the raw rushing totals might lead you to believe. But I also think, last year they had 2,100 yards rushing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was 1,090 for Bo Jackson, and we're projecting him to have about 100 more than that. And we're projecting Isaiah West to have about 500 more yards than he did. And so then you're looking at CJ Donaldson and James Peoples, and like that eats up a good chunk of their carry, their yardage, and they're going to run more than they did last year. And I think you're going to see 2,700 yards rushing, something like that, 2,800 yards rushing this year, something in that neighborhood. But there are only so many yards. We've already accounted for 2,000 of that. So
Mm-hmm.
okay, 400 ish here to Jacoby Jackson, and then you still have Legend Bay, you still have Turbo Rogers, you still have Favor Key who are going to get some. You figure, last year Julian Sane finished with -44. If he's even kind of at scratch or maybe a little plus this year, that eats up a few of those. So maybe they get to 3,000 yards rushing. That would be a pretty strong season. And if you're playing more than 13 games, that'll help with their 14 games. That'll help with that as well. But yeah, I feel like we have a lot of these yards are already spoken for between
Mhm.
Isaiah West and Bo Jackson, and there are only so many more carries to go around.
Yeah. Feels like we might need to take some of these numbers down because 2024 was the high water mark um, this decade, 2,662 yards. And we've left nothing for Legend Bay. And there will be more than nothing for Legend Bay. However, you go to 2019, 3,700 yards rushing, 1,000 more yards rushing than any other Ryan Day year. So maybe I'm not expecting that because that was a lot of carries and more tempo than we will ever see again. But what do you guys think will happen with Jacoby Jackson? Go ahead and throw those in the comments and be interested to see what you guys think. Of course, if you're listening, a 5-star rating and review. And also continue to find us over at BuckeyeInsiders.com. We would absolutely love to see you there. So that will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.